You're welcome. So at this point, we go to the, ask me anything. And usually we just go to me sharing my screen, but we asked for some questions ahead of time and they did come in. So I figured that we would talk about these things that had come in. And then, I'll drop to my normal sharing of my screen and folks will read off questions and we'll do the AMA. So for a couple of these, like what does the future of the admin look like? I would say that, if you think about, these web admin, the next the next 10 weeks, we're going to alternate weeks and have every other Thursday the session of the web admin. I would say that that would be a good way to see, where things are going, but also watch the product roadmap, and have conversations with Gernot. And, as it all develops, you'll see it through the road. It'll be reflected in the roadmaps and the releases, and that'd be the best way to answer that at this time. The next one is about Let's Encrypt, and most people probably know what Let's Encrypt is, but basically, you need, or you want to use an SSL certificate for your FileWave server. Sometimes, buying a certificate, at least historically, it's been, kind of an expensive spend for an SSL certificate. Let's Encrypt is kind of a really interesting idea where it's free. Now you could always use Let's Encrypt. It's just a normal SSL certificate. Operating systems trust it. It's pretty popular, but Let's Encrypt certificates expire every 90 days. So the headache is, well, every 90 days you have to do something to renew it. So we've kind of always had an internal script that could renew the Let's Encrypt certificate. We just never had a KB article about it. So we're going to publish a KB article and help you to be able to implement it without having to manually do something every 90 days, where the script would just handle it. So maybe Let's Encrypt becomes an option for you and you save a little bit of money at the same time. Or if you were thinking about doing or if you were doing a self-signed cert and you wanted to move over to a real certificate without an expense, this would be a way. I guess the only thing to keep in mind is, if you're changing, let's say you do self-signed right now and maybe you use a domain name that's internal. If you're thinking about changing the DNS name of your server, you want to think about how that impacts your enrolled devices. Like, would you have to re-enroll them? But once we have this article posted about Let's Encrypt, at least, it becomes an option that you could use Let's Encrypt. The next one was interesting. So, in the web admin, we have a profile editor, right? And, if you're making a doc profile, could we make that interaction better where, it's interacting with the desktop to define a doc? There are some limitations when you have a web-based profile editor in how it interacts with the macOS desktop. And those are things that we just have to think about what our way is to implement that, because Apple does not, allow that. It's not a safe thing, right? If you could go to a web page and it could interact with your desktop without permission, we have to think about tools that would let us interact in a way to add this kind of feature and interact with the doc. And maybe this is part of, there's a desktop tool that's part of this too. We kind of have to see like what's technically possible and try and implement the best thing. But again, as things develop, they'll likely show up on the roadmap, and likely discussions with Gernot would be good, and just keep educated on where we're going with the product, and let us know through product board, giving your ideas, like this, like, you'd like to see this, or, and you could also tell us if you're aware of a technology to accomplish something that you think we just aren't aware of. Let us know, because it's possible. The next one was about Intune and MS endpoint connector. This is where I'd say it's not currently on the roadmap, but if you submit it through product board, then it stands a chance of being on the roadmap. This is one of those things where we should be really good as as customers, you should be good at giving that feedback. As a company, when we see support tickets come in where somebody asks something like this, we should be good at telling you, hey, we should make sure you put this in product board so that it's recorded. Because I think Gurno mentioned the idea that, you know, if we never are told about it, then it can't happen, right? So we want to make sure that we know everything that you want.
And just to chime in on that as well, because it's not that we haven't heard this one before, we have, but we haven't reached kind of a gravitational pull to bring it front and center. So the more folks that talk about any particular topic, the more that brings it to the top of the board for us as well. So the more feedback, the better, and I'm sure Gurno would agree.
Yeah, for sure. You know, the more customers, anyone that works with Apple knows that whenever you file a request, they ask for the impact, right? The number of devices involved, because yeah, every software company, they have to base, you know, development and know how popular something is by number of endpoints or some other metric. So definitely let us know. There's no such thing as too much feedback. And then next, the migration to the new web admin from native admin, basics and best practices. Well, so the webinars that are happening, those like Ask Me Anything sessions every other week, starting next week, those are your opportunity to really go through that. And as we're overhauling the Foundry, we know that web admin material needs to go in there. We paused for a bit on we didn't add web admin material to Foundry yet because there were so many rapid changes occurring, you know, that the material would have to get done and redone. But we're getting to the point now where the web admin is pretty well defined about what it does. Now we have this association to deployment migration tool that's being built. So it makes perfect sense for us to have that in Foundry so that you could learn on your own, and these webinars that we're going to have. And they won't stop with these 5 this summer. It's just that's this batch, and we're going to think about having these periodically. So the last thing is about this feature request, right? Is it possible for FileWave to add GPU metadata for clients? So I'll be honest, I actually had to look up what GPU metadata was for, you know, for inventory. I hadn't heard the term. Andreas actually found it for me. But the answer is, there's sort of multiple answers. One is, this is a perfect thing to submit to product board, right? Like as a request and having those discussions with Gurno. But also, you know, maybe it is possible. And I would say, I don't have the answer about if it's possible. I know what it is. There are properties of GPUs that you can query to be able to tell what they're doing and what they're capable of. If there is, so if you're thinking about Windows, right, there's Windows, there's Mac. If you think about Windows, if there's a PowerShell library to access the information, or if you're on a Mac, if there's a way to do it through Python or shell scripting, if there's a way to do that, then custom fields can instantly get any piece of data. And we're going to talk about custom fields in both the October event in the US and the September event in EU. Custom fields let you add anything that you want to collect, as long as there's some way to get to that data, right? And if there is no way to access that data, well, then FileWave would have a difficult time adding it as a built-in feature as well. There are sometimes things that we can do because of the way the agent's built that you might not be able to do through scripting. But I would say, you know, this is definitely something that you could look at doing through a custom field. And if for some reason developing that or researching it was kind of above your technical level, then you could also reach out to us for professional services. We also have lots of partners, you know, that do consulting. So, you know, we could either help you directly or connect you with somebody that could maybe, you know, build the script with you. So those are all options. Okay, so then with those out of the way, I'm gonna get out of screen sharing. Well, I'm still in screen sharing, but I'm not gonna share the presentation anymore. So we'll just close out of those things. And I'm logged out. So I guess, were there any questions that came in that that we should tackle?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. All right, there were a few questions. So to start with, just kind of a generic question. So as we know, in 14.8, Observe Client will no longer be in FileWave. So are there plans to remove FileWave's VNC client when devices are upgraded to 14.8?
So I believe the answer is yes. I believe I've tested this. And when you go to 14.8, the Observe client disappears from services.
Perfect. Great. And then
Because,
are there
and actually,
any plans?
I'll just add one thing to that, because we did have a question. Somebody was worried about whether it would just be there but in a disabled state, and they just didn't want it there at all. And so I did double check that. So I just wanted to add that.
Great. Okay. All right. And then next I have, are there any plans to include archive and reinstate options into the web admin?
Tony, would you know?
Any particular command with a device, for instance, with the archive and reinstate, for instance, would eventually be there. I don't think it's on our short list right now. We're focusing on the associations conversion, so we're not really working on additional commands on that side. The basic process for everything that moves to the web is that if it was done here in the native console, Josh shows it's a C++ backend, so code was written for that, but it wasn't built in an API way. So as we move things to the web, first we build an API for it and then expose that API to the web, and then we do the front end for that. And that then allows you to use those APIs to do things with them as well. So that would be the process, but we haven't started on that one, no.
Okay. And do we have any information about the whoa, I can't talk. Do we have any information about the implementation of Apple's declarative device management?
Well, this is where I really wish that PN weren't on vacation, but PN's on vacation right now. But the general way that we approach each one of the Apple releases is to focus on the core components first. So those for us are the DEP profile changes, the support of the new OSs, the changes for configuration profiles are always the things that we start with first. That's what the team's working on now. The declarative, and I think you said deterministic before, Josh. I always do the same thing where I confuse the two of them, but
Yeah.
it is declarative.
Declarative, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically pushing the logic, what we would call smart groups, down to the device to let it make choices. That's a little more long-term. Apple's hinted at some, that's you better be prepared. So we're working on being prepared, but it's secondary to those core components that we're working on as far as config profiles and such. So I'll have to table that one and let PN talk more about that probably next time. But he and the team are working on getting ready to start that.
All right, and then the last one I have noted is regarding Let's Encrypt. So is the support for a generic ACME or the automatic certificate management environment protocol, or Let's Encrypt only?
So what we had was a scripted way to handle Let's Encrypt directly. It wasn't using an existing framework. And so the KB article that we get posted would be very specific to updating a Let's Encrypt certificate. However, I would say that if there is a framework that somebody feels is popular or they like, send an email. I mean, the easiest thing is to email that kb@filewave.com, for the knowledge base, and send me that, even if it's the link to a website that talks about it, because if we could take advantage of a framework and make it work across more things, then we definitely would. Okay. Let me just get back into here.
And I just wanted to note that some of you have in the chat have written more feature request type things. I am writing those down, and then I will just contact you about creating a feature request product board to get for those.
Yeah, and actually, so I want to point out something about, I'll go to the KB.FileWave for a second. I want to just point one thing out about the roadmaps in case you didn't catch it when we were doing it. So the product management pages in the old KB, you used to not see them unless you were authenticated, right? The new knowledge base doesn't require anyone to authenticate, but the roadmaps, we don't necessarily have them public facing, right? So these links go to the Foundry. We thought about it a bit, and the Foundry intro course, right, when somebody's first learning about FileWave, felt like the perfect place to show them off, right? So if I click on roadmap, I'm going to end up in the Foundry, and I could SSO in. We won't see anything crazy here. So it takes you into the Foundry. So this felt like a good place. And so just remember that these are always here, and they're within the 101 intro course in this product roadmap, all three of these things. And so you won't have to remember because it's in the KB. If you search for product management, it'll show up, and it'll take you right over to the Foundry sections, and then you can submit your feedback.
And that feedback doesn't have to be about huge features either. Jimmy, I see your comment in the chat about the default location in a file set still being root on the macOS side. That's a perfect kind of thing to put in as an enhancement request, right? Josh, if you go back to that portal for just a second, if you go to say the product suggestion one, that button in the top right, just submit an idea, is not linked to any particular thing. So you can just write whatever it is that you're looking for here. So that's a perfect example of making a change, though, in what I would call a minor enhancement, but it helps every day. And those are things that we really like to focus on too. So that's a perfect kind of request to put in there. And your point's accurate that we probably shouldn't default there since it's no longer allowed.
So any other questions come in? While you're looking, I'm just going to point out that although we said, the GA release of 14.8 is considered tomorrow, we do have a process where we roll it out over time. So even though we say the GA process is tomorrow, we've really been deploying it since last week. And when we do that, we want to make sure that the knowledge base articles are posted. So when you go to the KB, you can just click FileWave release notes, and we're doing just like we've done for other releases, where the 14.8 release notes are here, and the articles related to it are here, so you can read through them. You'll be able to see the changes, even if you want to look today just to prepare yourself. And if you'd like, whether you're on-premise or hosted, if you have interest in kind of being one of the first. Sometimes people want to be one of the first because there's a security update. Generally in our releases, there's also security updates for things like Apache or OpenSSL, any one of the libraries that we use that, have security updates fairly frequently. You might want to be in that early adopter list, or we used to call it early adopter, but it's just sort of the first people. Somebody ends up being first. So if you'd like to be in that first every time, it's really easy. I just add you to a list, and then you'll get an email, sooner than others. Okay, and we put, in a red warning, we want to make sure, I suppose this is really critical about 14.8, don't interrupt it. I do this myself, right? Something takes a long time and I start to question, is it going to finish? Do I hit cancel? What would be the worst thing if I canceled? You don't want to do this. You do also want to think about, if you have an on-premise server, right? And this is largely a warning for on-premise people because you're managing the upgrade. Think about if you back up your server, whether it's a snapshot backup of the server or you're using the backup script that's in our knowledge base, please make sure you're backing up because it's not just for upgrades. Something bad could happen to your server. You want to make sure that you can recover from it. There's certificates in there. You know, you really just want to be able to recover. So if you run the server yourself, think about if you've, you know, if you're backing up, right? Just ask yourself that question. Could I restore if I needed to? And best practices like backing up is also something that's part of the 2 training days, because we want to make sure that, you know, it sounds basic, but we found cases where somebody didn't have a backup, and we helped. You know, we were sometimes able to piece things together, but having a backup is critical. And don't cancel the upgrade.
Yeah, and a backup that's not actually stored on the FileWave server as well.
Yes, because we had somebody lose a storage array.
When we lose hardware, it creates so much work to restore that. And there was something you were mentioning before. You mentioned the on-premise folks. I just want to mention, for those of you who are hosted, the timing, of course, will be accounted for because the upgrades happen in the middle of the night. But the second thing about the ports, I just want to mention that'll be taken care of for you. So we'll make those adjustments so that your admin consoles will continue to receive notifications correctly.
Although I'd add to that, so the server will be able to listen on those ports. But if you are, and this can affect schools and corporations equally, if you block outbound ports, except for the ones that you allow, like there was a company Tony and I worked at where that was the case. You had to ask for ports to be opened, right? They were closed by default. So these ports are not like 80 and 443 are obviously open, but in the TCP and UDP usage, and I've meant to highlight this a little bit better, but they are in green right now. This actually reminds me, and you can kind of see that they're called out. And you know, you'll see the port numbers and it'll mention NATs. So just take a look at this article and ask yourself if these ports would be open. The port testing tool, you know, that's linked to in the article, does not include these ports as of this moment, but you can add them, you know, to what it tests. We're going to take a look at adding them to the tool. So any other questions come in, Emma?
I don't see any. I mean, I've answered a few privately.
Yeah. Yeah. Was there anything that you answered directly that would benefit everybody else to know the question and answer?
Well, there was a question about the 14.8 custom client being available yet.
Oh, that should be tomorrow, right, Tony? Or will that be today, that the custom client on the webpage?
It'll be tomorrow when we post everything, when we publish everything publicly. That's one of the check boxes that we go through and check.
All right, and then just had a few enhancement requests, and that's about it.
Okay, well, so I'll add to the 14.8 things. It kind of works out that we're having this meeting, you know, right around 14.8. We would have actually released it, you know, sooner, but we wanted to make sure, you know, to the download page, but we wanted to make sure we had this discussion with as many people as we could about the ports, you know, making sure that they're reachable, about the fact that in the release notes, right, that the observed client, and we talked about this, that the observed client is end of life. And so if you upgrade to 14.8 from a previous version, you are going to see that you can't use the observed client, right? It's not there. So then make sure as you step into 14.8 that you're prepared to use TeamViewer. And remember that there's a couple of licenses for TeamViewer in your server. And so if you have 10 technicians, but there's only 2 licenses, then you want to really reach out to customer experience about what to do. And you may not want to go to 14.8, you know, first thing tomorrow. You may want to just assess about whether you're good on TeamViewer. You know, did you take the steps to deploy it? We have knowledge base articles about it. You know, did you test it out, you know, that it works well for you? And if you have an issue, you could reach out to support. If there's like a typo or some kind of thing in the knowledge base that you feel like it's just wrong in the knowledge base, you can email that kb@filewave.com. That'll go to me and my group, and we'll fix whatever you discover in the knowledge base article. But at this point, that article or the set of articles about TeamViewer have existed for, I think, about a year now. So they've gone through a few iterations. The state they're in now, they're pretty well tested. So I don't know, otherwise, if there weren't other questions, I mean, maybe people are saving web admin questions for the webinars that are coming, and that's totally fine. We could always end this early if unless Tony or if anybody else has anything they need to discuss on this call.
I don't have anything particularly leaping to mind.
Okay. Well, while we do that, I believe that wait, let me stop sharing just for a second, and I realize that I have one more slide to show. So I said at the, when I was speaking earlier, and if anybody has something that jumps to mind last minute, feel free to
let me jump in
there.
Yeah, there was a question from Jimmy there on the features in the admin being deprecated. I want to talk to that a little bit as we're moving into the web and making sure that everything's in the web. It's been kind of a scattershot approach of the things that we've been doing in the web to make sure that we've got kind of a breadth of functionality, but no particular area of it is 100% done. When you look at it, like I'll pick an example like reports. Reports are in the web. You can build them, you can view them, but we don't have scheduled reports implemented, right? So we're not going to do anything with deprecation of reports in native until we've got it fully featured in the web. So when going through that process, we're evaluating which areas we're working on first. The ones that are kind of top of mind right now are enrollment. We'd like to kind of finish up with the enrollment pieces because the web doesn't do conflict resolution right now, and it doesn't do the automatic enrollment pieces. So that's one that's, for instance, on our targeted list. The general plan for anything that we're going to deprecate is in the version before. We'll at least the version before we'll publish that it's something we intend to deprecate soon while we're working on the other, and usually we'll try to parallel the two. So you've got the new with the old in a deprecated state, and you get a chance to use the new, give us the feedback on it, allow us to make improvements if there's some kind of catastrophic problem or something with it, that we can make those adjustments and then we'll move forward. So we're going what is it, slowly said the sloth, or however that book goes. So that's how we're trying to go with it, out of an abundance of caution.
And that question that I see there about the FileWave admin in 14.8, the FileWave admin that you saw on my screen was the 14.8 one. It's, nothing's gone away. In fact, even the profile editor, right, Tony, is still, you get that pop-up that tells you it's being deprecated, but it's still in 14.8.
That's correct.
And while we just see if there's any other questions, I'm going to share sort of the final slide that was going to thank everybody for joining, because it has the QR codes. We can still answer a question or two, if they come in, we can answer more than that. But I wanted to make sure everybody had these QR codes if you had interest in anything that we had discussed today.
Just show of hands, anybody on the call that's coming to training day in October in Indy? I guess that would be a virtual show of hands. there's at least one. We really look forward to seeing you if you get a chance to join us there. Any other questions, last minute or otherwise, and we can go to get everybody back to the beach.
And it could be even about these anything we've talked about today. It doesn't have to be product specific. If you had a question about what's happening on US Training Day, some aspect we didn't talk about, feel free. Since I can't see the chat though, I guess Tony will look for it. Okay. Well, if nothing came in, we could wrap it up. It's been a lot we talked about, and I look forward to speaking with you guys again in another quarter.
Yeah, thanks everybody. We really appreciate you joining us today, and look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks so much.